Hello, I'm Bill Goodman, Executive Director of Kentucky Humanities. Welcome to the 2020 Kentucky Book Festival Online. We're pleased you've taken the time to join us for this special program that brings together authors, readers, and literary enthusiasts from across the country and the Commonwealth, just like we've done for 39 years. All of our Kentucky Book Festival conversations would not be possible without the generous support of our sponsors, including Campbellsville University, who is bringing this special discussion to you. The program you're about to watch is a discussion between an American icon of literature and author of over 30 books, including his latest, A Time for Mercy, John Grisham, and New York Times bestselling author Kim Edwards. Thanks for being here. Now let's listen in on the conversation between John Grisham and Kim Edwards.
Thank you, Bill, for that lovely introduction. So John, it's so nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Happy to be here.
Well, great to have you here at the Kentucky Book Festival. I've been having a wonderful time reading your books in the last few weeks, catching up with the ones I haven't read, I should say. So they're very, very gripping.
There are too many of them.
There's so many of them. How many do you have?
I think A Time for Mercy is number 44 or 45.
Does that include the young adult ones?
There's 7 of those Theodore Boone books for kids. There's one work of nonfiction, one collection of stories, and I guess the rest are, legal thrillers. And there are 3 sports books.
Really?
Yeah. So yeah, it's a big pile. Too many books. But I've been doing it for 30 years, so they pile up.
Never too many books, and I think your fans will never feel like you've been doing it too long. Everybody is very excited about a new John Grisham book coming out all the time. So.
Thank you.
And I'm going to hold this up for people to see. I've just finished A Time for Mercy, and I want to talk to you about that in a little while. But I wanted to start, if you don't mind, talking about the fact that the characters in A Time for Mercy, Jake Brigance and his fellow lawyers or people in Clanton, Mississippi, who were characters in this book, main characters in this book, the hero in this book, are also the characters who were in your very first book, A Time to Kill. And I found that really interesting. So I went back and reread A Time to Kill. And I wanted just to ask you, because other people have asked, some listeners have written in and asked too, just to talk about that book a little bit as we sort of lay the ground to talk about A Time for Mercy. And I really wanted to hear, readers would like to know how you came to write that book, the very first book, A Time to Kill, back when you were still a practicing lawyer.
Yeah, I'd been a lawyer for about 4 years, so I was about 30 years old. I had never thought about writing. It wasn't a childhood dream. I didn't study creative writing in college. It was not something I'd planned to do. I'd always been a big reader, always loved to read, loved books, all different types of books. In 1984, I was a struggling young lawyer in a small town in Mississippi, very similar to Jake in A Time to Kill. And so that book is very autobiographical. I was dreaming of the big trial, the big courtroom drama with me in the middle of it, with a big crowd and all that kind of stuff that young lawyers dream about. I was working pretty diligently to pursue the dream of being a big time courtroom drama. I love the courtroom, and I spent a lot of time there as a young lawyer. And so that was my dream, very similar to Jake's in A Time to Kill. So a lot of his thoughts and actions and beliefs and politics and religion, all that, again, was very much me in the early days. I became obsessed with this courtroom drama, the story that eventually became A Time to Kill, but it was going to be a big murder trial in my small town in Mississippi. And I became really just taken with this drama and how it would play out before a jury of my peers, people I knew. And sort of on a whim, I convinced myself to try to write the story. And I started writing, and I began writing every day. And I got in the habit of writing something every day, and found the discipline to do it at certain times of the day, and pursued it for 3 years. And finished the book in 1987, early of 87. Tried to get it published. It was turned down by everybody. which is not unusual for a
Mm.
rookie author. And I eventually found an agent, and he peddled a book around New York, and everybody said no for the second time. And he eventually found a very small press that published Time to Kill in 1989. And when the book came out, it was a flop. I mean, it was an unknown publisher, unknown author, unknown everything. And so the book uh, didn't sell anything initially. But by then I had the dream of writing full time,
Mhm.
and I was determined to write one more book to see if I could sell more copies, and in doing so, maybe develop a readership and whatever. But at the same time, I distinctly remember telling myself, if the second book doesn't work, you can forget this little secret hobby. I'll just be a lawyer or a judge or something. But that's how Time to Kill was eventually published. When the firm came out in March of 91, 18 months later, it changed everything. And people realized there was an earlier book. And so it rekindled this interest in A Time to Kill, and it became a very popular novel.
Yeah, that's a wonderful story. And you're right, it's so true that so often with new authors on first books, they do go unnoticed, fly under the radar. So it's a wonderful ending to that story. And it's really impressive that you developed the discipline to keep writing every day and then to carry on even through the what must have been at the time a disappointment of having it out in the world, but not really doing what you felt it should or what it really ultimately did.
I don't know what I expected, because again, I was such a rookie in the business, and I didn't know what it would take to make a book popular or successful or whatever. And that's so true for many debut authors. You're so excited to get your book published, and when it's published, you realize there's nobody there to buy it or read it, and it goes unnoticed. And again, that's not unusual. I had a couple of lucky breaks though with my second book, and it did find the audience. But
Mhm.
I learned a lot of perseverance. I learned how to handle rejection, which is
Yeah,
crucial for an aspiring writer. You're going to get turned down time and time again, and you got to keep plugging away.
that's so true. That's very, very true. Well, I wanted to ask you just to talk a little bit before we move on to the other Jake Brigance books, but I wanted to ask you about those moments when in your second book, when things really did start to take off for you, when things started to turn. I mean, it's such a life-changing experience. And although, a lot of authors, eventually make it through those early days and publish books and go on, the kind of success that you've had is really remarkable and very rare. And I wonder what it was like when that was first beginning to happen. You must have still been practicing law at the time, I would think, and all of a sudden, your life begins to turn. And I'm just wondering if you have particular memories or particular moments that you look back on and think, oh, this is the moment when I knew things were going to change.
It was pretty shocking how quickly it all happened, because I sent the firm to New York to my agent in the fall of 1989, and he showed it to a few editors and publishers, and there was no interest in the book.
Wow.
And this is long before the internet, so back then it was not unusual for Hollywood movie companies to have spies or agents or scouts in the publishing world to sniff out books with potential. And unknown to us for a long time, one of these scouts got a copy of the manuscript of the firm. Again, the book had not been sold. The book rights had been sold. I knew nothing was happening, and the book surfaced in Hollywood, and a guy out there got it, and he ran off like 20 copies of the manuscript and sent it to all the big studios, sort of pretending to be my representative or whatever. Again, this was unknown to us, and he got kind of nervous when they started making offers, and so more and more companies made offers, and the offers got bigger and bigger and bigger. And finally, at the very last moment, they called my agent in New York and got him involved, and they had a big fight, and they all said, "Okay, let's make peace because it's something good that's about to happen." At the very last moment, in early January of 1990, at the the last moment, somebody said, "We should call the author and see what he thinks about this." And I got that magical phone call on a Sunday morning, and it was my agent saying, "We're about to sell the film rights to the firm." And I said, "What about?" I hadn't talked to him in a couple of months. I said, "What about the book rights?" He said, "We'll do that later." And that morning, we sold the film rights to the firm, to Paramount Pictures, for more money than I had earned in 10 years of practicing law. And it was just that was the moment. It all changed.
Yeah.
And then once we had the book deal, the movie deal, the publishers woke up, and we had another auction for the hardcover rights, paperback rights for North America. Doubleday bought those. That was another big moment. And then, remarkably, we kind of sat back and caught our breaths, my wife and I, and watched as the book kind of went around the world, the British rights, the German rights, the Italian, the French rights, just went on and on. Every week there was a different phone call, and we were on top of the world because suddenly I didn't have to practice law anymore. I didn't have to go back to the law office. I could take a long break from that grind, and it was terribly exciting. We look back on those days still and have a big smile, and even though it was 30 years ago, it's still fun to think about.
Yeah, completely thrilling times. That's really an interesting story about how that transpired, and how amazing that you were in the dark about it right until the last minute. Let me just ask, this is kind of an aside of my line of questioning, but I wanted to ask, what you thought of the movies that have been done of your books, because I know authors, you've had a lot of movies done of a lot of books, and I just wondered in general, if you've been pleased, if you've been involved. People always ask about that when I'm on tour.
I have been very lucky with Hollywood. I've had 10 of my books adapted. One was a documentary that came out a couple of years ago based on The Innocent Man, and it was very well done by Netflix. There was a TV movie made by Hallmark for A Painted House, and then either 8 or 9 feature films. And they were all enjoyable to watch. I didn't get in the middle of them because that's not what writers should do. If you sell your work to a Hollywood production company or to a film agent or whatever, you have to know up front it's going to be something very different from the way you perceived your characters and plot and all that. That's the nature of the business, and I knew that. I happened to know that early on. Just enjoy the moment, sell the film rights. Back then, they were paying a lot of money for film rights. They don't pay money anymore, but it was just icing on the cake. And then when the movies came out, from the summer of 1993 to the summer of 1994, the movies of The Firm, The Pelican Brief, and The Client all came out in the span of 12 months.
Wow.
And so all those books are back at the top of the list because a good movie sells a ton of books. And also A Time to Kill had been discovered. It was at the top of the list. And so it was a really crazy, really heady time for us. And we just thoroughly enjoyed every moment of it. I was busy writing the next book. I was just, I'm not making movies, I'm writing books. And we really had a great ride. And those movies were all fun to watch. They had big casts, they had great directors, they had big domestic box offices, they did well around the world. And they sold a lot of books, and they're still selling books because they're on TV somewhere tonight. You can find one of them. And those early movies had a huge impact on my career.
That's great. And you're right. I think it's like a translation from one genre into another. You can't have the same expectations of a film as you do of a book. Okay, so back to Jake Brigance. Before we get to A Time for Mercy, you did write another book featuring Jake Brigance as a hero, which was Sycamore Row. And I just wondered, when you were writing, when you were writing A Time to Kill, did you ever imagine you go back to Jake Brigance, or how did it come about that you wrote about him again?
Once I got A Time to Kill published, and once The Firm came out, my thinking back then, if I knew what I was doing, and I did not, I would do a book out of Ford County, where I'm from, a different kind of book, and then alternate that with a legal thriller, and go back and forth and try to develop 2, pretty fertile areas of material. The Firm was such a wild success, though. I realized I should maybe try another legal thriller. That was The Pelican Brief, and another with The Client. And I just started writing these legal thrillers that proved very popular. And I never forgot about Jake. I never forgot about Ford County. I used Ford County in a couple of books, not with Jake, but I'd go back there for stories. With Jake, I had to wait until I had a great story, another courtroom drama, because that's what you expect out of Jake. It took 24 years between A Time to Kill and Sycamore Row in 2013 before it was published in 2013, before I had a great story that I thought could sustain a long, legal battle that climaxes in the courtroom. And we were really surprised in 2013 when Sycamore Row came out. I was pleasantly surprised at Jake's popularity. And it was a combination of the book, especially the movie. Matthew McConaughey really brought Jake to life in the movie, did a fine job with that role, and it launched his career. And it really brought even more fans to Clanton and to Jake. And so the numbers for Sycamore Row were very impressive. And I remember thinking, I'm not going to wait 24 more years before I bring Jake back. So I started looking for a story. And with like all my books, it all begins with a story. You have to have a really good, solid plot to sustain a long courtroom drama or legal thriller. And I can't just make stories happen. I have to wait until I hear something or see something or read something or get inspired by a story and change it all up, fictionalize it, and here we go. So it took a few years. Well, that was 7 years ago. About 5 years ago, I heard a lawyer, a very well-known lawyer, talk about one of his most difficult cases, criminal cases involving a 16-year-old kid who had pulled the trigger. And the child was traumatized and abused, and how difficult it was as a lawyer to get the kid to trust him, because the kid could not trust anyone. Everybody had ever trusted it, screwed him, and he just couldn't, he couldn't trust anybody. And the lawyer had to build the trust before he could defend the kid. It was a compelling story. I don't know how it turned out, but it planted the seed. Yeah. And so once I had that plot and I could change it to fit whatever the fiction needed, I was off and running with A Time for Mercy.
Yeah, it's very gripping. You did a great job with that, with all of it. But that aspect of, is it Drew? It was very shut down.
Drew Gamble. Yep. 16-year-old kid who pulled the trigger.
Yeah, and his inability to even kind of understand why he did it himself, or to go to revisit that moment because he was so traumatized. That was very vivid and alive on the page. So, well, did you find that Jake was a different, or had grown as a character? How do you feel about Jake in over the course of the 3 books?
Great question. Great question. When I started talking about Sycamore Row years ago, I really worried that I could not, put myself back in Jake's shoes because so much time had passed. Jake is not aging nearly as fast as I am. we were the same age in Time to Kill, and Time for Mercy takes place only 5 years after 1990, only 5 years after the trial and Time to Kill. So Jake is only 37 years old. But I really, not much has changed in his life. A lot of things have changed in my life, and I was really worried about finding that voice again. My wife was really concerned about it, and we had some long discussions about going back to Jake, to Clanton, for another courtroom drama. And I remember saying, okay, look, let me write 100 pages. Let me get into the book, and you read it, and we'll talk about it. And that's what we did. And she read the first 100 pages of Sycamore Row, and she said, this is working. This is working. So I stopped worrying about Jake's voice at that time. I know the characters so well because it's so autobiographical, but I know that territory. I know the town. I know the people and history and culture and politics and religion and food and everything that goes into a very rich local setting. And so it was easy to go. It's still easy to go back there.
Well, that's great. How about you? For you, do you feel like your own writing has changed over the years?
In some ways, yes. There's been no deliberate effort to change the writing style, except when I write the kids' books. Obviously, the kids' books are a bit different. They're not as complex. The plots are simpler. The language is simpler. You have to think like a 13-year-old kid, which is often hard to do. About 15 years ago, I wrote my only nonfiction book called The Innocent Man, and it was about wrongful convictions. And I'd never really thought much about wrongful convictions, even though I was a criminal defense lawyer for 10 years. I never had a client I thought was, wrongfully convicted. I just was not aware of the problem. But when I jumped into the research for The Innocent Man, it took me into the world of wrongful convictions, and I realized how many innocent people are in prison. And that really gnawed at me. It still does. But it also made me stop and research and think about how that happens and all the other problems we have with our criminal justice system. And I began writing more issue books, issues like capital punishment, obviously wrongful convictions, mass incarceration, all these injustices that we have in our system that we could, judicial elections is another one. Just all the problems as I see them. And so the books, I think, became a bit heavier in tone and with issues. However, they're still designed to be entertainment and popular fiction, hopefully of a higher caliber, and entertaining. My goal is to entertain. If I can take an issue that bothers me and wrap a really strong plot around it and turn the pages and get the reader engrossed in the book, and then when the reader finishes, the entertainment experience is satisfying, but maybe the reader has also been made aware of something. That's that's what I enjoy doing. So yeah, the writing has changed and it has become more issue oriented and more serious.
That's interesting. I've noticed that about your work, reading through it, even some of the earlier books that, I was rereading the Pelican Brief and during recent deliberations about the Supreme Court, and just all the issues seem to be very, very, very timely and very compelling. And they are gripping. And I really like the fact that your books draw me in as a reader, but then also teach me things too. So one book I wanted to talk to you about, because we're here in Kentucky, when I said I was going to be talking to you today, one of my friends suggested that I read Gray Mountain, which I had not read before. And I found that one also, probably because the locale is so familiar, and also the issue of strip mining is so familiar, to be very gripping. And I wanted to ask you about that, whether it is based on any true characters there, how you did the research for that, and how you generally do research for your books.
I went to Kentucky. I went to the coke wheels. I went to Appalachia, and I saw the mountaintop removal up close. I studied the issue. There's so much stuff written about it. You can watch a dozen YouTube videos of the actual blowing up of the mountains, how they do it. It's incredible. The environmental destruction is astonishing in the coal country. And I'm involved with some environmental groups around in Virginia. I live in Central Virginia, and some of the worst strip mining is down in Virginia, Southwest Virginia, very close to Kentucky. And I was aware of the problem with mountaintop removal and how we're just destroying our mountains and our streams and our forests. And it was a really good issue to get into because there's so much rich material. And then spending time there in Southwest Virginia and Kentucky and West Virginia, and talking to people who are activists, talking to lawyers who represent coal miners, talking to the people who live there and the people who are suffering there. It was really an eye-opening experience. That's one of the great perks of being able to write books like this, because I learn with every book because I get involved in the research and I learn the issues, and you meet the people. You meet the people on the ground who make the book so much more complex.
Yeah, I found that incredibly gripping and heartbreaking and very real. I've been involved with a group that's goes up to the mountains and plants trees, because apparently they used to pack it down and plant grass, but now they've discovered they're planting trees. So I went up once and planted hundreds and hundreds of trees, but just seeing the devastations of the mountains is really, heartbreaking to see that.
It's astonishing. Yeah. It's all, it's legal, and there are a lot of violations of the various regs and laws and all that the companies do, but they get by with it. They have for forever, and I assume they will for a long time. But it's the country is so beautiful, and to destroy it like we're doing, like we're allowing them to do, is just it should be against the law.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, one of the things I love about your characters is that, your plots are so wildly different, and you explore so many really different, interesting aspects of the world, including strip mining. Your characters tend to be, I found, people who are lawyers who are idealistic, who have real principles that they adhere to and get into the law for seeking justice. And then either it's a bureaucracy that weighs them down, or there's something corrupt going on. So they end up sort of taking on the system, a lot of them themselves. And I find that really compelling. And I guess I just wanted to ask you, when you write, if you start with these ethical or legal concerns, or if you start with the characters, I guess I'm really asking you about your writing process. How does a story generally begin for you, and how does it unfold? And does it unfold in a linear way, or do you know the story before you sit to write, or do you discover it as you go?
I can't name you a book I've written that started with a character. Um, there are, as you know, there's some wonderful characters, and you have to have the strong characters in every book to sustain the story.
Mhm.
I start with the plot and the issue. What is going, what is going to be the issue? Like, I may write a book one day about the opioid crisis. I've been thinking about that for years, and I've got a ton of research because the problem is so enormous. The suffering is so great. The bad guys are so numerous. The small people who are getting crushed are so sympathetic. But it's a big, thick, uh, book, and I haven't found it yet. I haven't found the story. I'm still looking. So I'm always looking for what might be a hot topic, preferably something current, sure, because we can all relate to it. A few years ago, I was really just kind of not even looking for anything, and I read it. I found this great magazine article in the Atlantic called the Great Law School Scam or something like that. And it was a long story about for-profit law schools
Mm.
in America and how they kind of suck in people who think they're going to become lawyers, and they go out and borrow tons of money in federal debt, student loans, and they really should have no business in law school, most of them, and they can't pass the bar exam because their the legal education is not that good. But these companies are making money. They're owned by hedge funds. And I thought you should not profit from education anywhere in the world. It's, like prisons. We should not profit from prisons, but we do that. And so, but that inspired me to write a book that I titled "A Rooster Bar" because I could think of no other title. But that hit immediately. I read that article and I said, I've got to write this book. Other stories take longer to unfold, but I'm always on the prowl for an issue
Mhm.
or a story that I can take and use and change and fit the novel I want to write. Once I have the great story, most of them aren't great, most of them don't work, but once I have the great idea and I can see a very compelling opening, a hook early on, once I see a way to maintain the narrative flow for most of the book, and it leads up to an ending that I hope is unpredictable. I don't want the reader to know where it's going always. Once I've got all three of those worked out, I'll start making notes. I'll start making an outline. It's very linear, as you said. It's just chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. What's going to happen in each one? You can't predict everything, and you don't want to, because the surprises are delightful. When you run across a new character you need, or a new subplot, or something jumps up at you, and you want to include that. So you can't plan everything for 500 pages. One of the tips I give to aspiring writers and students is do not write the first scene until you know the last scene. And if you know if you know where you're going, if you know the last scene, it's very hard to get lost. And I don't like to waste time, rewriting. I start each year on January the 1st, a new legal thriller. I give myself 6 months until July the 1st. And I write 5 days a week, 4 or 5 hours each morning, and very disciplined about it. Again, I know where I'm going. I know what I've got to do to get there, and um, the pages pile up. I always finish on time around July the 1st. And it takes about 6 weeks of editing, which I don't like, but you have to do it. You have to listen to your editors, and I still do. But to get it all cleaned up and polished up, that takes 6 weeks. Then that's mid-August. It goes to press and publishes in the middle of October to take advantage of the Christmas rush. 1/3 of all books are sold at Christmas time. So. Yeah, that's a big part of the market. And usually about Labor Day, I'm bored again. I'm writing something else, whether it's a kid's book or a sports book or something. I'm always writing something.
Wow. So I know this is a crazy question, and it drives me crazy when people ask it on the book tour, because I've just finished a book and they want to know what the next one is. But I'm going to ask you that question. Do you know that your next book that you'll start on January 1st?
I'm in the middle of a sports book. I've written 2 sports books about football and one about baseball. And I love college basketball. We live in here in Charlottesville. We go to all of the UVA home games. My wife is a rabid Tar Heel fan, and my daughter is in Raleigh, so we're down there all the time for UNC games. Most of our wintertime is spent juggling two basketball schedules, and that's what we really enjoy it. But I've for years been thinking about a really good story about college basketball. Oh. And I got one back in the summer, and I started writing this book that I'm almost finished with about college basketball. And so that I hope to finish it before Thanksgiving and be done with it for a while. But January 1st is always there. I'm always thinking about what's the next legal thriller. And I've got a couple of ideas for January, a couple of good ones I've had for some time. And I'll pick one, in the holidays. I'll have some downtime and decide which one to go with. And I run the idea past my wife. We have long discussions about story ideas. I tell students and aspiring writers, one of the most important things you can do is find somebody who loves you, who wants you to succeed. It can be a spouse or a boyfriend, girlfriend. It can be a beloved teacher. It can be, anybody who really cares for you and who will read your stuff honestly and comment honestly and support you. And I got lucky with my wife because Renee has always been there to read my stuff and to comment liberally, as she loves to do. And we get through each story. So I'll show her story ideas throughout the course of the year. When I get a good idea, I'll do a 2-page or 3-page summary, show it to her, and we'll talk about it, argue about it, back and forth. And it's just part of the process.
Yeah, that's wonderful to have that someone who reads with both, support and also willing to be candid about what they think about it. Do you have her read or have anyone read while you're writing, or do you finish the whole draft and then have the reading done?
Nobody sees it until Renee finishes with it. It's no fun to read a book over a 6-month period. So I normally give her the first 2/3 of it, pretty deep in the process. If I'm not sure about something, a subplot or a character, maybe she'll get it halfway through to comment on what I'm worried about. And then it's chapter by chapter, back and forth until the end. That has worked now for a long time.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And it's wonderful that you're still generating these lots and lots and lots of ideas, still excited about writing. Your fans are going to be very pleased with more books coming in the pipeline. This is a question sort of off writing, but you're known also, in addition for your writing, you're known for your philanthropy. I was reading about you, and I wondered if you had causes that you support. I mean, you obviously explore a lot of causes in your fiction, and I wonder if you have causes that you support just through giving or volunteering or things that you like to do.
Yeah, we joined the board of the Innocence Project in New York 12 years ago or more. And it's a wonderful organization and with a very simple mission. We believe that guilty people should go to prison and innocent people should not. Oh, and we're very much aware of the problem with the thousands of innocent people who are in prison. And it's very difficult to get them out. And we litigate from coast to coast. And as of now, we have 370 DNA exonerations and some of those people were on death row. These people were completely innocent. And I correspond with several guys in prison. I can't get out. I know they're innocent. I know they're lawyers. I don't take cases. I don't practice law anymore, but I try to support them and try to help them get out. So that's very much a part of what I do. My last novel, The Guardians, came out last year, is all about wrongful convictions, and it talks about some of the underlying causes, and so that's an issue. Every wrongful conviction is a great story, just because of the sheer amount of suffering and tragedy and injustice, and it's compelling reading. I wish I could write all of them. My wife, a couple of years ago, got really involved with a group called No Kid Hungry, and we've become very involved with efforts to end childhood hunger in America, which is a problem that is very solvable. And there are ways to do it if we could just raise enough money to help schools and families and communities find the food, because the food's there. There's plenty of food in this country. But the idea that before COVID, 1 in 7 kids in America faced food insecurity issues. That means they're not sure about where the next meal's coming from. And that means they've probably been hungry at some point in the past month. And that's a very high number, 1 in 7. Well, since COVID, it's now 1 in 4.
Wow.
And kids aren't in school. They're not getting their free lunches or breakfasts. And we're scrambling to raise $100 million to go into school districts and buy equipment and show the people how to get the food to the kids. And it's a great organization, but we're working overtime right now because so many kids are not getting fed right now. And so, you start thinking about, I'm not sure what cause could be greater than childhood hunger, feeding hungry kids. And so we're really involved with that right now. We enjoy the nonprofit work, and we're always torn about which group to support next, which group to get involved with. And that's one thing that the success has allowed us to do, is to give a lot back, and we thoroughly enjoy that.
Well, that's wonderful. It's wonderful that you've taken the opportunity to give back. I'm sorry, I'm cutting away here because I'm listening. I'm seeing some audience questions, but I just want to say how moving that is to hear about the nonprofit work you do. I think it's such important work, both the Innocence Project and the Feeding the Children. That's just very good to hear about. Audience questions. Do you see A Time for Mercy being made into a movie with Matthew McConaughey returning as Jake?
I think it would be great. A reporter asked me last week if I thought Matthew was too old to do Jake. And I had just finished a 1-hour Zoom with Matthew because his first book just came out, and we were talking about books. I hadn't talked to Matthew in 25 years. Once the movie's over and they move on, you kind of lose track of all the people in the movie. And I'd met him a few times, but he went on to bigger and better things. So we did the Zoom together, and the reporter said, "Do you think Matthew can still play Jake?" And I said, "Matthew is aging better than anybody I've ever seen. He started off with great looks, and he still looks great." I said, "Yeah, he can pull off the role if he wants to." I think if Matthew wants to do it, the movie will probably get made. Although nobody's making movies today, and I'm not sure. No one's sure about the future of feature films because many of the theaters are closing. The chains are going under, and all the money is moved to television. So no one knows the future of feature films. And so, it could be a 3 or 4 part series on HBO or Netflix or something. I don't know. I'm not in charge of that. That is somebody else's decision. If a production company wanted to put together the package and include Matthew, that I would talk to them and we would try to get it done. But right now, feature films the future looks very, very shaky.
Yeah, everything is so uncertain. It's really hard to know.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting close to the end of time, but I wanted to ask if there's any final things you'd like to say to the audience of the Kentucky Book Festival. We've been so glad to have you here.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I love book festivals. I love to hang out with people who love books and readers. I never I never pass up a chance to say thanks to the people who have read the books over the past 30 years, the very loyal fans who have continued to enjoy my books and make it possible for me to keep writing. And I'm going to keep writing until, I don't know, I can't write, but I tell folks, if you keep reading, I'll keep writing, and we'll have a lot of fun together.
Well, that's great. You know, as I was getting ready for this conversation, I was reading a lot of books of yours that I hadn't read before. And my dad was a huge, huge fan of yours. And he died about a year and a half ago. So a lot of the books I had in my hands were his books. And I know he would have loved this conversation. So, and my brother too is a huge fan. So on their behalf and my behalf and the behalf of the Kentucky Book Festival, we thank you.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. My pleasure.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, John and Kim. What a great conversation. Once again, we appreciate the support of Campbellsville University, who sponsored this special program. We also want to thank you for joining us for this 2020 Kentucky Book Festival online event. If you're interested in purchasing one of the books discussed today, please visit our independent bookstore partner, Joseph Beth Booksellers, at josephbeth.com. For a complete schedule of Kentucky Book Festival conversations, visit kyhumanities.org and follow us on social media at kyhumanities. For Kentucky Humanities, I'm Bill Goodman.